big week for Dodd-Frank. It looks like it's going to easily pass with some Democratic support, but progressives say this is only going to help big banks. Your response?
It's nonsense. Actually, what it does is provide relief to community banks and some of the mid-sized regional banks. It does not restrict the regulators from going down the chain and identifying any practices that need additional regulations, but instead of assuming you've got to over-regulate, do it when the behavior of the bank warrants it.
Senator Elizabeth Warren says that she wants to see an amendment added to this that would say if any of these community banks that took taxpayer bailout money qualify for this, that they should be exempt from these types of regulatory relief.
Senator Warren never saw a regulation she didn't want to apply to a banking industry that's already struggling. What we're trying to do is right-size the regulatory regimen so that we can get community banks back in business. We've seen a dramatic fall in the number of community banks that have that personal relationship with the people seeking financing. It's the wrong way to take this. We've got bipartisan support for this bill because we've right-sized it. We think it makes sense. We think it's going to have an enormously positive impact on the banking sector.
I just got back from the House, where I interviewed Congressman Luke Meyer, who tells that they would like to see some tweaks once this thing gets to conference. What are some things that could come up from a policy standpoint once this gets out of the Senate?
Well, hopefully we can address a lot of that as we process amendments on the floor. Ideally, we'd like to send a bill to the House that would be well received and send it to the president's desk. What we've done here, and I was a part of the members of the banking committee that negotiated the agreement, is crafted something that's very important to maintain the integrity of so that we get the support. The best way to do that, address the concerns here, get the bill to the House, send it to the president's desk.
The big development out of this bill is that it does raise that threshold from $50 billion to $250 billion with regards to stress testing. What's next, provided that this gets signed into law? What's the next policy item for the Senate Banking Committee?
Well, hopefully we can get to a point of right-sizing for the larger banks. I still think that there's something to be said for removing the obstacles that are really just regulatory cost and uncertainty to try and figure out a way. We need to do CCAR, we need to do stress tests, but my gosh, why do you have to have 100,000 pages that you submit to an examiner 4 days before they start a bank examination? There's no clear evidence that the information these banks are providing are even instructive to the examination. So let's get smart about regulations.
Quick follow-up on that, because I want to get to trade. But on that point, is that really something that could feasibly get done? Or do you think something like reforming the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau would be next on the list?
Well, I think even with the CFPB, it's going to be a challenge to get Democrat support for doing some of the reforms, but we definitely need to step up oversight and cast light on what we consider to be bad behaviors that are not in the best interest of the consumer.
Gary Cohn out last night announcing his resignation. Who would you like to see replace him?
Well, I'll leave it to the president to decide who his replacements are going to be, but those are big shoes to fill. I think Gary's done a great job. He was pivotal a role in the tax reform bill. I share some of his concerns with the discussion of tariffs, and hopefully we'll get a good replacement and get them back moving. But he's left a great legacy.
Senator, earlier today I spoke with Secretary of Commerce Wilbur Ross, who told me that they are taking a look at a more surgical approach that has been advocated by the likes of yourself as well as House Speaker Paul Ryan. Are you sensing today a signaling from this administration that they are hearing the concerns and moving more in your direction on the issue of trade?
Well, I hope so. It's not that we don't want to call out the bad actors, and China is clearly, and there are other nations that are guilty of what we consider to be unfair trade practices, but we also have to realize the global nature of trade today, and that many of our trading allies, you never want to go to war without allies, right? And I think we have to be very careful to attenuate the policy to get at the bad actors, but not have a stifling effect on global supply chains. We don't make any one thing in any one country, so you have to look through the full effects, and you also have to look at the unintended consequences of tariffs on agriculture and commodities and other things that come into play that are not at the basis of the tariffs that are being imposed.
The one question I get the most from folks on the terminal is, what can Congress do, Senator, should the president put forth a trade policy that is out of line or out of sync with what the likes of you folks are saying?
Well, hopefully we can get ahead of it. I mean, at some point, if the policy raised to a level that there was consensus in Congress that we needed to weigh in, we can have that discussion about congressional action. But hopefully we can just work with the president, work with the administration, and get to trade policies that eliminate or reduce these bad practices, but not disrupt the relationships we have with so many good trading nations across the world.
All right. Anything else on your radar in terms of Senate banking? We've got about a minute left.
Well, I think we've got to continue to look at ways to right-size regulations. Instead of swinging for the fences, there's a number of things that we can do to remove the regulatory burdens. We want to protect consumers. We want to protect consumers' information. There's a right way to do it. There's a heavy-handed way to do it. What we're trying to do is really get the economy moving, get capital flowing, get people the loans that they need to invest in business and grow the economy and create jobs.